Yo guys, today we'll make a project where you can control the game on your Python script through a joystick hooked up to your Arduino. The data will be transferred serially through a USB cable. The game I've chosen is Space Invaders, so allow me to show you how it works. Now I'm a complete noob at gaming, so excuse me for the bad play. So for the graphics of this game, I've used the Turtle graphics library. It's free, you don't need to install it. The only library you have to install is the pyserial library, because that's how we're going to transfer data from Arduino to Python. So now that we have seen it working, let's move to the circuit, which is really simple. But before I tell you how to wire the circuit, let's see how a joystick works. A joystick comprises of two potentiometers or variable resistors, which unlike a normal resistor can change its resistance depending on the position of the knob instead of having a fixed resistance. A potentiometer has three pins: 5 volts, ground, and the wiper pin, which is the pin where the resistance changes when the knob is moved. It consists of a resistive track where one end is connected to 5 volts and the other end is connected to ground. Nothing significant is happening. The current is just flowing. However, it gets interesting when we add a wiper pin to the mix. So if we connect the wiper where one end stays in contact with the resistive track and the other end is connected to some kind of load, let's say a LED, and the first end of the resistive track is connected to 5 volts and the other end is connected to ground, then the further left we go, the resistance increases and the voltage and current coming out of the wiper will be less. But if we go to the right, the resistance decreases, which means the voltage and current coming out of the wiper pin will be more. And that's how a potentiometer works. So a joystick consists of two such potentiometers, and when we move the joystick, we have some voltage coming out of both of these potentiometers, which can be read by a microcontroller, let's say an Arduino, and we can control things using a joystick just like that. And that's all you need to know about a joystick. Okay, that was boring. Anyways, keeping the theory aside, let's move to the practical side of making the circuit. So this is the wiring, and as you can see, it's really simple. You can follow the table here if you don't know how to wire the joystick to the Arduino. So after the wiring, this is the code we need to write. You're basically taking the raw values from the joystick and sending it to our Python script using the serial monitor. In the first line, we initialize the serial monitor with the baud rate of 9600. Then we just define a few variables like joystick x-axis pin, y-axis pin, and then we'll map those values, but we'll talk about that later. So these two variables are basically the pins for the VRX and the VRY. Then we have mapped the values of the joystick from 0 to 1023 to -6 to and 5, and same with the mapped y-axis. And then we've written a simple if-else statement where we check, okay, if this is the value of the y-axis or the x-axis, it will send commands like up, down, left, right, and nothing. And this is all the code of our Arduino. Alright, so this is the Python code, but before I explain the code, there's one library that you need to install. That's the pyserial library. So open your terminal or command prompt, whatever it is, and just ignore that for a second. So write pip install pyserial and hit enter, and here it's showing requirement already satisfied because I already installed pyserial. But this is what you need to write. So a couple of libraries that we imported. Then we made the screen, the pen, which is showing the score and showing if the game is over or you won. And then we made the player, the bullet, and then here we basically specified at what serial port we're gonna read the data and at what baud rate. And then it's gonna create the incoming data first, and then it's gonna start reading. So I made a empty list called enemies. So what we're doing here, I'll just highlight it. So in these lines, what we're doing is basically generating the enemies. So 10 times it's gonna append a turtle to this enemies list. So now we have created 10 turtles, and then for every enemy, this is what it should do. It should go to a random place. It should be red, it should be circular. These are the things. And then there are 3 functions: left, right, and shoot. So it's basically for a player, so it goes left, it can go right, and can shoot. But shoot is the more tough part. People find it a little complex, so I'm gonna explain this part. And yes, if you think I'm going too fast, then I've given the link for the Arduino and the Python code in the description below, so you can check that out. So first we declared a variable global. So boot state is a variable that I've declared up where I've declared the bullet, and basically holds 2 states: ready or fire. And so we have first declared it global, so that we can now change the value of this variable inside this function. So it checks if the state is ready, means it's not firing, it's about to fire. Then it's gonna fire and change the boot state to fire. And down there in line 83, here, it's gonna see if the boot state is fired, then it's gonna shoot. So it sets the boot state to fire and basically shoots up. Then here there are a couple of variables that I've made, like score, enemy speed, and the number of enemies. First, it displays the score in this format. You can use a simpler one if you want to. Anyways, then reads the incoming data from the serial port, but we don't need to read all the data. So this variable decoded bytes basically extracts the important data from the serial monitor, from the serial data that we're getting. Then it checks if the decoded byte is left, then it's gonna call the function left, and the same with right. And if it is up, then it's gonna call the function shoot. So if I move the joystick left, I can go left. If I move the joystick right, the player goes right, and if I move the joystick up, the player shoots. As simple as that. So as I've again told, if the bolt state is fired, it's gonna fire. Then it says if the bullet goes off the screen, so you shot and the bullet goes up and off the screen, then it's gonna set the bolt state back to ready. So now you can fire again. If you don't do this, then you can only fire once, then you cannot fire because the state is still in the fire mode. Then I made a function called collision, which basically detects the collision between the any two objects. It can be bullet or the enemy or the player. So it takes 2 arguments, object 1 and object 2. So this variable called collision calculates the distance between the 2 objects. Now this requires a bit of math, but it's easy when applied this way. So this is basically the Pythagorean theorem, which basically it's a long formula. You can just search it on Google. Now, it's not a math class, I know, but math is applied in programming a lot of times. So anyways, this collision variable, if it is less than 25, means if there is collision, then it's going to return true, otherwise it's going to return false. It's going to give boolean values, either true or false. So now here in this for loop is basically for enemy and enemies, means for every enemy these are things it's gonna do. So if the game is running, first is gonna move, the enemy is gonna move in the zigzag pattern. First right, then down, then left, then down, then right, and in the zigzag pattern it's gonna go. Then it's gonna check the collision. So if the collision between the bullet and the enemy is true, now here bullet and enemy, we have passed the arguments. So if the collision between the bullet and the enemy is true, it's going to set the bullet state to ready, because when you fire, the bullet state is set to fire. So once it kills the enemy, now the bullet state is again set to ready, and then it decreases the number of enemies. It basically subtracts 1 from this variable and increases the enemy speed. So now as we gradually kill the enemies, the speed of the game increases. But if the collision is between the enemy and the player, then game over. It's going to show you the score, and this is for the collision part. Now if, and I'm sorry, I also forgot to tell one thing up here, when it takes the collision between the bullet and the enemy, it's also going to increase the score. Now you can increase the score according to your knowledge, but I chose 30. You can just increment it by 1, it's your choice. So coming back to this if statement, line 132, so here basically limits the speed, because if we just increase going on increasing the speed, it's gonna become impossible for the player to play at one point of time. So it's gonna limit the speed. Then in the last if statement, it basically checks if all the enemies are dead. If they are, then you win, and then in the end it basically updates the screen. So this is the brief explanation of the code. I know I couldn't explain the whole code. That's because if I would do that, then it would take a lot of time. Plus, I'm not that good at explaining code. But if you want to see the code, I have given the link for the Arduino as well as a Python code in the description below with full explanation. Also, if you're new to electronics, then I've also given the link for the circuit in the description. So that's all for this video. Peace out.